If he had a hand like aces, I wouldn't really expect him to raise, given that the board's so dry and, you know, so good for him. And now everybody somehow... Alright, so we've got a fun start. So DFL makes it 2.5x, which is perfectly fine. I tend to go a little bit on the smaller side, but nothing wrong with 2.5. It's not a big deal. And so Joman goes for the min 3-bet, which is not something I'd recommend. Just 3-betting a wider range in position, deep stack does make sense, but not going for a minimum raise. I would definitely go to around 7.5 or 8. So maybe Joman is a recreational player. Maybe he's really good and has a funky strategy. Who knows? I always like funky strategies. So Wing guy is probably thinking, well, this Joman guy probably doesn't have very much, so I'm going to cold 4-bet him here, which he in fact does. So let's see what happens. So DFL ends up flatting, which is kind of awkward, right? Because, I mean, he only had 2.5 big blinds invested, so he's got to put in 9.5 more big blinds out of position to 2 players. So yeah, this is a, you know, it's a play that I see happening, but it doesn't happen a whole lot, right? Because, I mean, as I said, it's not a very attractive position to be in. You don't have much money invested, you can easily let it go. Now, if you believe that these guys are way out of line, then re-raising aggressively makes a lot of sense. Queen 7 deuce is a pretty blank board. Sevens are possible. Queens are definitely possible, right? DFL could have it, especially deep. Wing guy could have it. Even Joman can have it. Hands like ace queen, king queen. So the board's not super wet, not super dry. Check, check, check. King's a really good card for wing guy. He's most likely to have ace king, I would say. So it makes sense that both players will check to him a lot, which happens. And he bets big, which, you know, makes a decent amount of sense. Definitely wouldn't want to go much bigger than that. But yeah, sure, makes sense. DFL calls. And river's a 4, which doesn't really change anything. I mean, maybe wing guy was bluffing with ace 4 and improved, but, you know, DFL is not really calling worse than ace 4 anyway, so wing guy wouldn't really have much showdown value. Wing guy is mostly representing ace king plus here. So he shoves, saying, hey, I check back ace king on the flop. I like the turn. I'm going to bet through now. Or maybe he trapped with a hand like queens or with a hand like aces, or maybe he just had a hand like king queen. Maybe he goes more thinly with a hand like king jack or even ace queen, but, you know, that's a bit less likely because it is very funny pre-flop situation. DFL calls and ooh, wow. Interesting. Okay, so fun first hand. DFL gets min 3-bet and wing guy cold 4-bets. I mean, this is definitely way too light in theory. However, if he believes that Joman is just completely crazy, just let's say 3-bets 20, 30%, then I don't really mind it necessarily, but it's usually way too light. And then DFL should normally just 4-bet. However, he's probably thinking, well, both of these guys are way out of line, so I want to end up going for the call and trapping them. And I wouldn't really mind that in theory, but the thing is, you're 250 plus big blinds deep with Joman. So if you believe that Joman is really, really out of line, you want to get the money in versus him, right? So yeah, I don't really like this call. What I really like is the fact that he's thinking about ranges. He's thinking, well, the king is maybe a good card for me right now when I have aces, right? Because it doesn't really improve wing guy to two pair better too often, but I know it's a bad card for my range, or at least a better card for wing guy's range. So I'm not just leading my aces because I got aces, but I'm checking because it's not a card it's a card I don't want to lead much on. So it's a really clever check, and it protects your checking range, right? You cannot only check tens on the turn or queen jack suited, or maybe like king 10 of hearts or king 10 of spades, and then you side call the turn, and then on the river you always fold or call and lose. So it's good that he actually slow played his hand. So pre-flop I'll give him a 5 out of 10, but post-flop I'll give him a 9.5 out of 10. So overall I'll give him a 7.5. And wing guy, it's really difficult to say because it really depends on how crazy he thinks the cutoff is. If the cutoff is just like a a random nitty guy, then this is a terrible play. If he's completely insane, this could be a great play. And he's got a decent bluffing hand, so I'll give him a 6 out of 10. It's quite ambitious, but sometimes ambition is necessary in the right spot. So you see here, the difference between this game and like a high 6 game is that this type of crazy preflop dynamic often doesn't exist. Unless, of course, there's a big fish in the pot, but I don't know anybody here. So yeah, very fun hand. We've got Don Moses open raising 2.5. We've seen that before. We've got the MP player flatting in the cutoff, and he doesn't have a full stack, so he could be slightly weaker. Who knows? We've got Brooks flatting the button, which I don't really like. I mean, he's got a very short stack. When you have short stacks, re-raising is very powerful, but flatting is not. Because, I mean, usually you want to flat one deep stack, right? So you have a lot of playability in position, but I mean, the pot's going to be $9+ and Brooks will have 3x pot behind. So it's not like he has a lot of playability left. Like he can float light or raise flops and then overbet turns or raise rivers and all these types of cool moves. He doesn't really have many moves left. However, if he believes that Aaron doesn't have many good hands and Moses is raising a wide range, shoving here is actually, not the worst play, or just maybe even squeezing small. So he flats. And now Crasher flats, which is also, I mean, uncommon. So we see this is a very, very strange hand so far. And we've got an ace-10 flop. I mean, this obviously favors under the gun since he's going to have tens and aces every time. He's going to have ace-10 suited and maybe offsuit every single time. Let's see. And so now Crasher leads, which doesn't make sense. I mean, his range is the weakest of everybody's. He probably does defend ace-10 off, whereas, Aaron Ho shouldn't really have ace-10 off. Doesn't mean he doesn't have it. So, yeah, that doesn't make any sense. Crasher should never lead here. Yes, he's got pocket fours, but then again, the others may have pocket fours as well. He never has tens, he never has aces, he never has ace-king, he never has ace-queen. So I'm not a fan of this lead. So when Don Moses calls the two guys behind, he's saying, he's pretty strong. If he had a hand like, let's say, 10-9 of spades with no backdoor flush draw, I don't think he's going to be calling the flop. So he's representing mostly a good ace here. Maybe he doesn't raise at all in this flop and he has all the sets and everything. If he had a hand like aces, I wouldn't really expect him to raise, given that the board's so dry and, so good for him. And now everybody somehow calls, which is kind of funny. Because there's no open-ender out there, there's no flush draw out there. So, yeah, it seems like, I guess when Crasher leads, he probably has a pair a lot. Probably an ace a lot. When Don and Moses calls, he probably has an ace a lot, or better. And then Aaron and Brooks probably might have one of the last two aces, or they just have a gut shot. But that's pretty ambitious. Knowing that the other two players probably have an ace, or at least one of them has an ace, it's pretty ambitious to float a gut shot here. I mean, it's something you should do sometimes, but it's still a loose play. And now Crasher leads to 20 and the 26 here. I mean, I don't think he's bluffing very often. Could he have taken a hand like Queen Jack and let out? Sure. Could he have taken a hand like King 4 suited and he's just bluffing? Or, could he have a random hand like 5-3 of clubs? Yeah, sure, he could. But it's not that likely, right? It's a difficult one to pull off. He's basically putting the button all in as well. So this is a tricky spot for Moses. I mean, he knows that Crasher is pretty strong here, and he also knows that Aaron could be shoving on him occasionally. He knows that Brooks can be shoving sometimes. At least because Brooks is only shoving for $6 more, it doesn't reopen the action, which does help a little bit. Anyway, so I expect Don Moses to be calling here. Pretty tight. I mean, even if he has a hand like Ace-King, it's a pretty tough call. Let's see what he does. So he min raises. I mean, this looks really, really strong, right? This looks really strong. I mean, Crasher just led 4-way, and then everybody calls, and then he just bets again, right? Pretty big, and he puts one guy all in, basically. So he's looking really strong. So when then Don Moses raises next to act to the minimum, I mean, this really looks like he has the nuts. Let's see what he's got. And so Crasher calls, okay, which is unconventional, but he should have some calls. River's a 10, which is kind of a funny card, right? Because if one of them had ace 10, that would be less likely. Tens are less likely now. Ace 4 got counterfeit in case anybody has that. So let's see what happens. Moses bets half pot and he has the aces. Wow. Okay, so I like the open raise with aces, obviously, and I love the flop call, but I don't really. I mean, the turn raise is okay. I get what he's doing. Usually, if there's one hand you ever want to slow play, right, this is the hand to do it with. You got top set. Even a club doesn't hurt you that much, right, because you have these clubs in your hand, so you know your opponent can't have the nut flush. So if there's ever a hand you want to slow play, it's this one. However, he just thinks, well, I know this crasher guy's never bluffing like this. So if I raise, he's not really going to fold. But if I call, and let's say this is the river, maybe he check folds. Or the river's a king, maybe he check folds. So he knows he's kind of face up and he's never really bluffing here. So, but he just thinks, well, I know Crasher's, he's got something. I don't know what he's got, but I think he's not, going to fold. So this play is, kind of face up for value, right? It's just min raising four way after, four way flop and turn bet. So I don't think Don Moses is just going to take 4-5 suited and shove all in or min raise here, looking to block fours and ace four. No, he's got it. We know he's got it, but not everybody may know that. So I'll give him a 6 out of 10. I'll give Crasher. I'll give him a 3 out of 10. 4 out of 10. Okay, let's not be too harsh. So very funky hand for sure, and definitely quite a few interesting plays. I don't think anybody really of the four played their hand very well. We don't even know what Aaron and Brooks had, but they for sure didn't play their hand well. And then, Don Moses definitely played his hand best. But then again, you got aces on an ace-high board, so it's also not the most difficult play in the world, right? So in order for you to get a 10, you need some kind of special play, right? Or at least you need to play your hand well in a very difficult spot. Under the gun 3x, again a bit unorthodox, but by no means a bad play. Unorthodox is just like different, unusual, but not necessarily inferior, right? So when Soplak calls his bigger raise, his range is going to be a bit stronger than if, let's say, he just called a min raise, right? Because I mean, he's got to put in extra money out of position, which is not a great spot to be in. So we see a Jack 6-5 flop, which is kind of a it's kind of a neutral flop. Both guys are going to have some sets. Both guys are going to have some flush draws and big jacks, etc. Neither person is like significantly ahead. Obviously, Sankt under the gun is going to have jacks every time, where Soplak is not going to have jacks. Some guys will never have jacks here, some guys sometimes, but they will both have sixes and fives. Third part bet, a bit less. And the check raise by Soplak, which I really don't mind. You should be check raising this board quite aggressively. Don't mind the sizing either. The 7 does complete 4-3, it does complete 8-5 and 8-9. I'm probably expecting a pretty big bet here if Soplak does bet. Pretty big bet. Okay. And he gets shoved on by Sankt. And I think you get to shove some here. There's two flushes out there. There's a lot of straight draws out there. I do think Soplak probably has a straight advantage, a tiny one. So it's not like under the gun can go crazy, but he does get the shovel in sometimes. Okay. All right. So 6 is under the gun. Perfect raise. I like the c-bet. He doesn't 3-bet the flop, which seems fine by me. I like the check raise with king 4 suited. I mean, you just have a good amount of fold equity and you have a big flush draw. You also don't block a lot of his random c-bets with air. So yeah, I like it. Obviously, you can't always check raise all of your good flush draws, right? Otherwise, when the board runs out with clubs, then you're not going to be protected. So you're going to get run over in big pots. But I like it. On the turn, I don't mind. And then when he gets shoved on, it's kind of annoying, right? Because you have an open-ender, but you have the bad open-ender. And you have a flush draw. But when Sankt shoves under the gun, he usually has a nut flush draw. So we'd have to look. Let's see how much he had a call. Yeah, also, he shoves 90 over 16, right? So he's still getting a pretty poor price. This is probably a fold with king 4 of clubs. It really, I mean, it's close. I would say normally it's a fold. If you think that Sankt is way out of line, then obviously this could be an easy call. I mean, not an easy call, but it could be a call. I would say you probably don't have the odds to call here. But I don't hate it, at least. You really wouldn't like to see ace-8 of clubs here. I mean, you got it in 30% roughly, okay? So I'll give Soaplock a 6.5 out of 10. I'll give Sankt an 8.5 out of 10.